Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Irgin Shir Torah, Moses Boston. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's shir, all the men here in the main shul, all the women upstairs and downstairs, everyone listening in through the phone and watching through the live stream. Bruchim Aboim. As I mentioned in the past, Irgin Shir Torah relies on the tzibur to help support the shiurim by sponsoring the shiurim and donating towards the shiurim. Call Irgin Shir Torah 718-851-8651 or email tapecenter@yeshivanet.com for this great schus of Habatzis Torah D'Rabban. Tonight we'd like to give big yashakarach to Elam Shem, sponsoring tonight's shir the Nishmas, Harav Gedalia Aryeh ben Rav Shmuel Yitzchak, Olav Shalom. The outside is tonight Chof Alav Tam, B'Sei Nishmos Yitzhura B'Tzara Chaim. Now we have the cover to have with us once again, Rav Yosef Viener, Shlita Rav Kehilas Shaar Hashomayim, speak on the melting pot of society. How separate are we? It's my cover to call on Rav Viener for tonight's drasha.
It's always a tremendous nachas to be back. And we're going to try a bit of a moifis tonight. The topic I'm going to try to at least highlight took me over 75 shiurim in Muncie. So a different Malcolm Torah in Muncie asked me if I can give a review. It's never tall enough for some reason. Okay. So I asked them if they wanted me to review it in 35. They said no, 2. So now, Irgin Shir Torah wants it in 1. So the al-regalachas. So I'll remind you, I don't bring tapes are gone, CDs are bulky, and as we had last year, these are available on both levels. And in the back here, and Mr. Frechter, if you can get it out of him, and they're basically about 1,500 shiurim now for free, just the cost of a blank, which is $10, and then we just refill them. So otherwise, the cards are there. You can get it off of the website if you have a filter and an accountability program on your computer. If you don't, then blow the whole thing up when you get home. I'm not giving you a pass to go on. So this sugya is fascinating, somewhat counterintuitive. And if I condense it to an hour and change tonight, as I started doing 2 weeks ago in Muncie, you're going to hear a lot of things that are going to sound unusual. How can it be? And there's always a lot of pushback. So I invite you to either go on the site or get the USB, because I can't do justice and we can't possibly answer all the shaylas. It's more to give some of the yesodis of the sugya and bring up some of the common issues we find here in America. I think the sugya has never been so nageya. The good news is we're steiging and we're learning. The other news is there's certain things that creep in that we've been in America too long and in Kehilas too long in general. It's what the 3 weeks is all about. The sugya, as we just heard in the title, is really Chukasayim. I had a chalaim. I was going to speak about Chukasayim and Lesilbush, which is a sugya we went on to afterwards because they have a lot to do with each other, but we'll save that for a different year. And the melting pot is exactly the opportunity and the problem. The opportunity is in a democracy we get to do what we want. And the problem is that in such a free society, the culture is invasive, pervasive, and it's never been more difficult to keep it out due to the advent of technology. We're going to, in the first 10 minutes or so, just put down some of the rules and then go immediately to the myriad of examples we have. I'm going to try to go through the calendar. We'll see if we get past Halloween. We'll see. I have big hopes, but if you're all still here at 1 a.m, we'll know we're succeeding. Otherwise, we'll know we're going to at least get you interested enough. The pasuk, it's one pasuk, one short siman in Shulchan Aruch, which is fascinating. So how can you make 70 shiurim out of one siman in Shulchan Aruch? The answer is not my fault. The one Siman Shulchan Aruch gives you the klalim, and in every gullus, and every culture, and every atmosphere, you have to figure out what applies, what doesn't apply. And these shaylas are challenging. And I'm warning you, a lot of the things that I'm going to mention, half the people say, oh, that's pashut, and the other half say, how can that be? And sometimes the truth is somewhere in between. Pashut, none of this is. How can it be? Again, it might be a siman of our way of thinking here in America, and a lot of the things that caught on. But we'll get there and you'll understand a little more as we go through it. The Torah brings down Hilchos Chukas Ha'akam, it's Siman Kuf Ayin Ches and Yeridea. So that's one siman. You can and should look it up afterwards. Just go through the siman, the Torah, Bas Yosef, Bach, the Mechaber, and the Shaar, and all the Nesei Kelim, and then you'll have the basis for the thousands of tshuvas written on this topic over the various generations. Torah brings the Rambam. Kasav Rambam ein holchem b'chukas hagayim v'lo medam lahem v'lo b'malbish v'lo b'seyar. You read this Torah, you get very nervous, which is why I'm starting with it, because this seems to be certainly the underlying theme, but there are many more kulas than what the 3 lines we're reading suggest. So the Rambam says, as the Pasuk says, as the Gemara seems to say, you can't be daimah to the Goyim, and you have to be different, not only in thought and in Hashkafas HaChaim, Yel Yisrael Muvdul Mehem, and Muvdul means different religion, the only emes in the world, and we have to know what the Am Nivcher, but not only in Machshava, not only Belev, Yadua Bil Malbusha, B'Shar Maisav, K'moshe Muvdul, B'Daita, Ub'Dei Yosef. Which means that we have to not only think different, and we have to have a different set of rules, we have to look very different. That's a very odd Rambam to start off with, standing here giving a shir on Chukasem L'Selechu. I'm standing here wearing a tie, a Borsalino hat, and a double-breasted suit. At least I'm Yates with a double-breasted suit. It went out of style years ago. I wait till it comes back. So there's a kiyum in that in this sugya, to not dafka follow every time somebody decides he has to make more money in Paris and change the styles. There's absolutely no rhyme or reason. It's a classic chukasayim. There's got to be a heter for it, because you all do it, but the ties get bigger and bigger, and then all of a sudden they shrink, and the brims get bigger, and the chayna. That, if you haven't figured it out by now, that's just to force us to constantly buy things, and that drives the economy. For all I know, it's some yidel in Paris making all this up, but that doesn't mean if the Welt is looking at it as style, fashion of the Goyim, chayra, that's a problem, and we know, we hope, that it's not. Hopefully within the next hour we will touch upon Rabbi Shlita, where he explains why wearing a regular suit and a tie is mutter. That's the lashon of the Rambam. The Mechaber and the Ramah, I will read parts of Siv Aleph and Siv Beis. The Mechaber says, "En holchem mechukas avchavim," and he immediately gives examples. Lo yubush malbush hamayuchad lehem, things that are specific to Goyim. Ramesh's argument, I know that all of you look like you're passing out already, so before you take off your ties and your jackets, Ramesh's argument is going to be that the consumer is the king, and they're making it for consumers, and they're trying to figure out what consumers want, and we're wearing it at the same time they are, and we're also consumers. So they're making it for us as well at the same time. That needs further hesber, but that just to keep everybody seated at the shir, dressed. I want to mention, because the Mechaber and the Rambam, starts off with the Malbush, so the Malbush shouldn't be the same, which is a kasha. It's not just a kasha on us. You look at the Sfardim and various dairis. I will say, the more Haimish you are, the more of a kiyum there is in the Ashkafa Shabbat. You wear something distinctly different, certainly a kiyum. That doesn't make it necessarily usher for everybody else. And there are many rayas throughout history that Jews did wear the typical turbans, robes that the others were wearing, and it was not considered, even in the time of the Rambam, it is so chukasayim l'salecha. So Moshe is not a chiddush, he's just trying to explain why it's so. You shouldn't have a wild haircut or a hairdo like the Goyim. That still applies. So, as an example, long brisk payas come and go, and they get more popular and less popular. Do you ever wonder why? Not because you just came back from Eretz Yisrael, but often it has something to do with the Goyim, whether a bootleg sideburn is installed or not. after some maneuver we don't want to mention. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, very good. So the pashtus is that if you're doing it every time the style changes, and it clearly, with the rest of the getup, looks not very Yiddish in time, we're not that comfortable with that. But if somebody is growing payas and it's a hiddur and it goes to the bottom of the ear instead of over the bone, and it's all the shitas, you can't really, this is an issa d'oraisa with chiyuv malkus. So I like to use the word usr and mutter during my shiurim only when it's really usr and only when it's really mutter. So you hopefully won't hear the word usr from me unless it's really usr. And is the tzura good when you're changing the haircut every time they change it? No. Is it necessarily an issa d'oraisa if it happens to be a hiddur in another area, even though that's not why you're doing it? One could argue that perhaps that wouldn't be an issa. However, you will bump into people like this, they just don't know any better. They're getting a very, very yeshivish haircut, but only on the side, where you shouldn't be cutting so close. That's the problem, the issa of Pas HaRosh, Pas HaZoken, the Machlekes Rishonim, and Chaber has 2 days of Stamei Yeshayim, whether Mitzrayim Kain Tyre is also when you shave it too thin. It's an easy thing to avoid, even though the Stam of the Mechaber it's only usher with a razor. But why get into a shayla like that? And the people don't know, and they're doing it because the Goyim are doing it, and it's in style. So besides having a very close brush with Chukosayim, they're having a close brush, a bad pun to use over here, with the Isser of Pas HaRosh. Why get into these shaylas? We have enough Yisurim like Lashon Hara and Bittul Torah and the like that we have trouble with. Why go near an Isser d'oraisa if you can avoid it? However, you can't say it's the actual Isser necessarily, although it's coming very, very close. The Ramah now says, listen carefully, because this is going to be a main focus of a lot of the shaylas. What is the gather? If we can wear, assuming we can wear suits and ties and hats that only we wear now, but it started off everybody was wearing it till a few decades ago. If all that is not the Issa D'Oraisa Chukosayim, so what is? When is it really an Issa D'Oraisa? L'chol Odeya. So the Ramah brings down, let me first tell you the Shita Mishanim because it's a bit unclear who the Ramah is passing like. The Ran holds that if they're doing something that you can't readily explain logically, the automatic fallback position is that you have to be chayshish, maybe it's rooted in Avodah Zarah. Quite often, especially nowadays, the guys themselves don't know. You ask them in the street, you ask them about Halloween, they ask them about even the December holidays have been commercialized. They won't necessarily know, but often, if you do research, you don't have to. You will find out that it is. You don't have to do that. Ramesha says it's not a Safed Reis L'chumra. The Isser is an Isser B'vados. When you can't explain it, why are you copying them? It might be from a very nefarious source, either Avodah Zarah, Nichush, Kishuf, and the like. That's the Ran. The Ma'arik says a similar thing, but he adds Pritzus, Gaiva, Shachatz. These are big umbrella words, which we're going to talk about some examples, some of which, as I was discussing with my son in preparation for camp, there are a lot of funny things people wear in camp and funny things people do. And that's part of the sugya. Again, for an Issa D'Oraisa, we have so many things that we struggle with. Why should we even come close to a possible Issa D'Oraisa? But if it's something that is picked up from the Goyim, even if you don't know it is, and they picked it up either because it's inherently pritzistic, gaivadik, shachatz, somewhere in between, they're involved in kishuf and nichush and old-time superstitions, or avodah zarah, you don't have to prove it. Any chash whatsoever is going to be the Issa D'Oraisa mitam vados. And without doing the research, sometimes it's painfully obvious. For this shiur, we gave shiur in there for like 9 months. I researched it just to show it wasn't necessary. People, mamina, b'nei mamina, but it's just astounding how little research you have to do to connect the dots and find out how quickly it goes to all sorts of middle-aged kishuf and nichush and fortune-telling and avodah zarah and the like. And that's the nature of the Isser according to the Ran. The Ma'arik says the Pritzas, and the Gaon says that even if you're pretty sure the minhag started like 2 years ago in America and it's not rooted in avodah zarah and it's not inherently Pritzas-dik necessarily, it's just strange, it's funny, it's odd. So the Vilna Gaon says if it's not something we would have started ourselves, he passes like Taisus, the third Shita Mishayim, that is also anyway. Ramesha, this took about 4 or 5 weeks just to mavar what I'm telling you in 2 minutes. But Ramesha, in one of his later tshuvas on Thanksgiving, he has 3 different tshuvas on Thanksgiving. Anybody who ever bumps into you Erev Thanksgiving and said, yeah, it's Pashut, it's mutter. Pashut is the wrong word to use. Ramesha apparently struggled with it. He has 3 long tshuvas, and at the end, he's more machmer than mekel. It's not Pashut, it's Aser. It's certainly not Pashut, it's mutter. And then I've had many people tell me Ramesha held it was mutter. I said, I don't know which Rabbi Feinstein you were reading, but you apparently read the first one, because he keeps going back to it over and over again. He explains to you what his hesitation is, and I'll get to it soon. Lamaisa, if you have, according to the Vilna Gaon, who passes like Taisus, and Ramesha in the third tshuva says sort of that everybody agrees to this more or less. If you're copying something and it's strange and it's silly, why are you doing it unless you're trying to copy the Gaon and be like the Gaonish culture? The Gaon certainly holds like that. The question is, does the Ramah? That's a question. Again, we're dealing with an Issa Daraisa. You don't have to be a machmer for every Gaon, but Ramesha himself says the Sugya, the Alma, seems to be, you better have a good logical reason for copying it. One of the easy examples we're going to give, I once had a friend of my son over the house, and they're whispering, and my son comes over to me. It looks like he wanted to ask something. I said, can I help you? He said, yeah, my friend wanted me to ask. Okay, so what is it? Bachram have good shaylas normally. This one I wasn't prepared for. It's a number of years ago. So he felt funny. He said, my friend wants to know, do you eat sushi? So I had to admit the truth. The truth is, when I first came out for 10 years, if you paid me a lot of money, I couldn't get near it. But a lot of people eat sushi even though they can't stand raw fish because it's the yuppie-ish thing to do, and you got business meetings, and they keep serving it and serving it and serving it. My son, at that point, was so young, he thought sushi was a Jewish food, which, if you're young enough, you could think pizza is a Jewish food also. So here's a good example. Sushi is very not Jewish. Comes from the Far East. And have a lot of rice. Al Shem ha rice, nikra sushi. You have it with raw fish, you have it with cooked fish, whatever you want. But it's not an American food, it's not a Jewish food. Pizza is very Italian. We have this knack of adopting things and enjoying it. Is there any cultural issue with chukosayim over here? The answer is no, not even according to the Gaon. I want to start off with a kula. After that, it's going to be... why are we eating sushi? We're not trying to be like the Goyim. Maybe at first we brought it in because it was the thing to do with our business associates. But if we're eating sushi, I hope by this point in time, because it tastes good, if you hold it tastes good, then we're eating it for the same reason they're eating it. It happens to be a pretty anti-Semitic food because it's a brachas disaster. I don't know what bracha you've been making, but whatever bracha you've been making, you're wrong. So, I don't know, whatever. If you're making one bracha, so you could say, some said, no, it's pashut, it's mazainis. Oh, it's mazainis, very good. So the rice, al shem sushi nikra rice. And what's with the fish? The fish is tofu. Many people think sushi means the fish. It's hard to say, vegetables are taka tofu. It's hard to say the fish is tofu, and it's hard to say the rice is tofu. I personally, I don't have it that often. But when I have it, it's not al chasna, I don't hang around the shmorg. Not that that's an isser. Shiloh, where that comes from, but I'm usually writing something up in the chassan's tish. But if I would have it, I'll make a mezainis on the rice and have a shahako with whatever water or drink I'm having with it, and that's probably the best way to cover yourself. So it's inherently not Jewish when you have a food, you have an ikar and an ikar, and you don't know what bracha to make. So that's just an aside. Pizza, why do we eat it? It tastes good. It happens to be a decidedly not Jewish food, because the Gemara says you're not supposed to pick up more than a kazayas. It's behemish, or the Gemara says not good manners. These things are very not Jewish. I picked these two because, especially the pizza, we couldn't have made up such a food because it seems to run against the Gemara. What the heck there is? I don't know if you've ever seen somebody eat with a fork and knife, which I don't whenever I have pizza, which is not that often, but I was born here also. Most people don't eat with a fork and knife. The question is, how are you picking up many kazesim and putting it towards your mouth? That's not a Yiddish food. So the argument could be is that's copying their culture. Lamaisa, at the end of the day, we're eating it because it tastes good. The same reason they're eating it, and therefore it's mutter. So even the Goin L'chai would hold that anything we would pick up ourselves, even if we didn't make it up, but we see and we like it, and it makes sense, so that can't be an isser of chukosayim l'selechu. Many of the other examples we're going to speak about go downhill from there. Let's first finish the Ramah. The Ramah talks about Malbushim, and he says Malbushe Pritzus, or something that there's a minig chayk ve'ein tam b'davar. It doesn't mean there's no tam. It means there's no apparent reason, and therefore we have to be chayshish. Maybe it's rooted in avodah zarah or gaiver, pritzis, depending which rishon you hold. Or like Taisus, if you can't have a good reason why you're doing it, you're copying the guy, in which Ramesha feels we should paskan like. Sheyesh bo shemetz avos chavim avoseihem, meaning even if they don't know. Avol davar shanagu, the Ramah continues, if it makes sense and they have a ta'eles. And he brings an example from a doctor's overcoat. It was a way of hanging out your shingle. So you wore a white coat, so a yid can wear that even though the guy thought of it, but it's a good way to hang out your shingle and tell people you're a doctor, a blood letter, whatever it was then, and that is mutter. V'chein sha'isim mishum kavod otam acher mutter. If it's something that looks nice, can you wear a tuxedo? That's a pretty goyish zachal. That's not. It looks very much like a kapata with a funny different ending, but. And the kapata is a Prince Albert. I wear one on Shabbos. I once met somebody, and they were trying to figure out, they weren't exactly familiar with our, so they said, oh, that's how quaint, that's a Prince Albert. I'm trying to think, who was Prince Albert? Probably something to do with London. But it comes from the Goyim, but it's a formal wear that you have to occasions, and if it looks nice, that wouldn't be chukasayim. Lachain sarfin al hamalacha ema mishum darkei Mary. This is a Gemara Sanhedrin, a complicated Gemara, and this is where the machlokes is. They had a minig to burn the personal items, the clothing, and like when a king died. And the Gemara says not darkei Mary. The Gemara based on a pasuk. So Taisa says from there, you see, even though it makes sense, it's for covered, nobody else can use his things. We still needed a pasuk because we wouldn't have thought of it ourselves. It is baltashchis. That's Taisus' raya that we're not so quick to pick it up unless it's exeris akasuv, and we have a pasuk indicating this was the minig in Klai Yisrael before. We don't do it anymore. The equivalent lahavdil is retiring a number of a baseball player. Well, we might get to baseball, whether it's chukasayim, if you have a game that you might be going to, and you solve the Pritzis issue and the Kol Isha with the national anthem and the seventh inning, God Bless America, and all the other issues. The good news is, Ramesha says, it's not chukasayim. So you have to solve all the other issues, but if you solve all the other issues and you're sitting in a seat that doesn't have all the other issues, and when the national anthem comes on, you put on my Shaar and you listen to about chukasayim, and you're sitting there, Ramesha says it's Bittul Torah maybe, it's Moshev Leitzim, he has all sorts of other choice names for it, but he says it's not chukasayim because they're having a good time, and we understand, makes sense. You could say the rules could be this way, the rules could be that way, but they're running around having a good time. So that's not chukasayim. Interestingly enough, baseball, apple pie, like the things that are so American, Amish says that's not chukasayim because we can explain what they're doing. So that's I said about counterintuitive. You have a lot of things in the sugya where you'd start off and you'd think, okay, well this has got to be what everybody's doing it, that's got to be usher, and sometimes it's the exact opposite, as we will describe. One other heter in the Machaber, somebody's carved Lamalchus. Did you ever hear the expression, when in Rome, do as the Romans do? That would be classic chukasayim l'chayra. So if you're dressing up dafka to look like them, to blend in, to hear about the Gezeiras Achmal Islan and help get them repealed, it's mutter. And the Pesachim discuss why is it mutter. If it's direct sakans lefashos, I don't need a Machaber. And if it's not, why is it mutter? It seems to be a heter that when you're clearly doing it with a different intent, even though you're trying to prevent a long-term danger, you just want to be there if there's a danger in the next 20, 30, 40 years, that would be mutter, because muchach, you're doing it just to blend in for your reasons of the security, long-term security, political action of Klai Yisrael's needs, and not because of chukasayim, needs further hesber. But we will go on to the examples. Let me just discuss the Thanksgiving, even though we're going to go through the calendar in a moment. But Thanksgiving is a fascinating one because our Pesachim who held it was completely mutter. There are many who held it was straight chukasayim. Moshe, as I mentioned, has a few different tshuvas, lengthy tshuvas, where he takes the opportunity to explain what the Gedarim are because you have to explain it for Thanksgiving. Moshe has no problem with giving thanks, no problem with showing patriotism to your host country. Obviously, it's not an issue, so July 4th won't be an issue. Fireworks on July 4th, to go watch or to shoot them off, just make sure you know what you're doing. They just became legal in Rockland County. So my children asked me if they could buy some. I said, I'd rather not. If you buy it, you can carefully get somebody who knows what they're doing and shoot them off on July 5th or 6th. And you can have a good time. We have a backyard, so if it lands somewhere else, it'll still be my backyard, I hope. And it won't crash into anything. Why did I say July 5th and 6th if that sort of misses the mark? It's probably mutter fireworks are an expression of simcha. I get a little nervous because if you see enough examples, even what you're going to hear tonight, fire is always very questionable because anything involving fire usually involved Avodah Zarah and the fire gods. And the amount I know about fireworks, it all came from the Chinese in the Far East, which is all Avodah Zarah. So I'm a little nervous about it, but Lamaisa, not nervous enough to answer it. If you want to do it on July 4th, fine. The advantage of doing it on the 5th or 6th, first of all, you can get a better deal on the fireworks. And second of all, at least you don't have to be doing it on their chaga too. So if all things are equal, why not? But I don't believe it's usher because it is a pretty international expression of simcha. So getting back to Thanksgiving, no fireworks on Thanksgiving. We have turkey, and interestingly enough, Moshe gets stuck on the turkey. He has no problem with the giving thanks, no problem with the day off. It helps us learn and go to legal holiday shiurim. That's gavaldik. Moshe wants to know, what's this mishagas about the turkey? Interestingly enough, Moshe in the discussion seems to be assuming turkey is kosher, which is a big sugya b'fnei atzma, because you need a Masorah on birds, and we don't have any Masorah because the Apache Indians didn't have the Masorah to give it to us. So it's a problem, and they were looking for a quick spice route to the West Indies, and that's why it's called Hodu, because they thought they discovered India. Quite complicated. And they said, of course there's a Masorah. India is close enough to Europe, but it's not an Indian bird, it's an American bird. So the shaila is close enough to a chicken, basically, to give us a Masorah. Most people eat turkey. Major kashrus organizations give it hechsher. There are yechidim who don't. Moshe seems to be assuming his kashrus doesn't mention a word about the kashrus of it. He talks about the chukasayim, and he says because he holds that the sugya really points to the fact that if something is silly, even if it's not rooted in avodah zarah, and it's not pritzistic, they dress the turkeys well on Thanksgiving. So nothing pritzistic, and everything is wonderful, but it's silly. Why are they hopping on a turkey for? What's with the turkey? So again, I'm a fifth generation American, believe it or not. So I'm sure somebody's been having turkey for a while. We don't have it, but we were almost on the Mayflower, so I had some reason to start asking around, what is with the turkey? So I got a hold of the original menu of that original meal, believe it or not. They have it. It's not such ancient history. And of course, Moshe is always right, even though Moshe is saying it with his Das Torah. The menu was very long, and they had primarily deer and a lot of fish. And in the list somewhere was turkey. So what the chop on the turkey for? So we all think we know the answer. Well, no, what's with the turkey? The answer is everything in America is marketing. What are you going to market? A deer? A cow? It's good flesh, good steak, but it doesn't really fly, either do turkeys. But it's like, how's this going to work? So they hopped on. A turkey represented a New World bird, so they hopped on the turkey. So it's funny how we're all okay with that reason. Ramesha thinks that's absolutely ridiculous. You're having a whole yontif all around a turkey. He says, that's silly. If it's silly, it's chukasayim. And he doesn't outright answer it, but he's more night to the chumrah than the kula. He says in the end, no, if you do it, don't do it every year. Chag v'la yaver. And I get the shayla all the time. I said, don't make World War III. Have somebody from a family, about Shuva, he's coming in. He can't go for their holidays, for their chagas, and he can't go for his. And like Turkey and Thanksgiving is the only thing they can have a meeting of the minds. So it's not us, it's not us. Ramesha leaves you a Pesach. There are Pesachim who are more mekel, Pesachim who are machmir. Lamaisa, I tell them, you don't have to do it every year. Better not to eat in the dining room. They eat in the dining room. It's like Shabbos, Yantif, Yom Noraim, and Lahavdil, Thanksgiving. Try not to hold the cranberry sauce. Don't make all the pictures because you don't need everything there. And try not to do it every year. That's what Moshe suggests. But he's not comfortable with it because he holds it's a shtus, and he holds we should paskin even if it's a shtus, even though we know it's not rooted in avodah zarah, and we know it's not rooted in kishuv. That's an important yesod. And the others who are makel say, no, the Ramah really only asked for the pizzas, the kishuf, the yichushin. It's silly, but at least we know why they did it. They're marketing. They picked the most interesting animal on the menu, and the whole thing was interesting. They had like outnumbered 2-1 white men to Indians. It was a very small Suda, and it didn't catch on right away. But as things went on, and there are those who hold this absolutely also because it's not chukasayim. It came straight from their avodah zarah because as Christians in the country, they put it forth to thank their version of God, and the history is on their side in terms of it being a religious holiday. We have Baruch Hashem, a separation of church and state, so it's l'maisa on the law books. It's not a religious holiday, and hence the Mekil Moshe is not overly concerned with that. He's just concerned about the turkey. So that's the Thanksgiving. We're going to begin with the calendar. We're going to go back to Halloween before Thanksgiving and then skip over Thanksgiving as we covered it. And there's some fascinating shaylas. I'm preaching to the converted over here. Nobody here is trick-or-treating. However, there were many, many people in the 1890s and 1920s and 30s and 40s and who were doing that because they had enough of a struggle figuring out what we can do, what we can't do. So this is not impinging the year of Hashomayim of the previous days. It's just they were struggling with a lot, and they came, unlike Bavel, when they came to the first Galus and everything was set up, due to the Midas HaRacham HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we weren't zeicher to that Rachamim because we didn't deserve it apparently, and it was, well, a lot of disarray. So, no, what could be wrong with some Hershey chocolates in a bag and some costumes? We have costumes. We'll get to that soon, should we? We have the costumes, different part of the year. We have costumes also. What could be so bad? Well, Halloween is probably the classic example of a clear Issa D'Oraisa Chukosayim. The Goyim might not know it. The Yidden certainly didn't know it. I'm not talking about the candy bars that were treif and then kosher and then treif again and kosher. But forget all that. That was another problem also. But these are Heilige Yidden. They're just trying to figure out what's going on. So people asking. So the kids wanted to go. How often can you say no? They didn't know that it's an Issa D'Oraisa. Halloween is based on heavy sources in Avodah Zarah, Kishuv, Nichush, superstition, ghosts, goblins, the dead, the alive, everything in between. You don't need to know this. If they're doing funny things, then it's Asur al Chukasayim. But it happens to be that this is a classic because the Goyim today, your average kid in the street, will say, no, I just collect candies and throw eggs, depending what neighborhood I'm in, and we have a good time. So that he doesn't know, and he doesn't have to know, but it's classic Chukasayim, and it's Asur to participate. If you live in a neighborhood where they're coming to you, and b'nei darkei shalom, you have to give, then give. That's not called participating. That's called Eva and darkei shalom, and that clearly is mutter. December 25th, I don't have to comment on. You don't need to still give Chukasayim to Asur that. I mention it because it's an important springboard. A lot of people don't know this, and I'm not here to attack anybody's parnasa, and they should all have parnasa, and I always down the kaschus. The Yidden don't know any better. But to celebrate in any form whatsoever January 1st is an Issa D'Oraisa and totally out of control. There are restaurants in the 10, 20, 30, 40 range in not any newspaper, but some newspapers and some other means of communication that have special menus and party rooms, and they're just missing information. It's not a secular holiday. It's a religious holiday. There are 1,000 riots to this. This is one of those things you need a little Amidas Chachamim. I researched all of this heavily. As a matter of fact, in the middle of the Shaar, like 3 months into the sugya, I asked some of the guys if they can get a resident galach to sit here with us so we can get everything right. We didn't need it often, and it would look funny when he's sitting there with the collar upside down, right side, whatever. But it's tied in with December 25th. It's a religious holiday. Before it was a Christian holiday, it was a pagan holiday by the Romans. There are daiva heiser sources. It started as a religious holiday, and it's irrelevant if today everybody is celebrating in a secular way by drinking and carrying on. First of all, that itself is a minig of priestess. So that would answer it anyway, but you don't need that. Just know the history, or at least know when there's a shayla. We know when Rosh Hashanah is. That's what's surprising about this. Why do you even need, why does anybody need to hear this? I ask people and they say, I understand Halloween is a chiddush to me. I didn't know that January 1st, that's the only time I can have some champagne. I looked at him, I said, are you thinking for a moment that that's our Rosh Hashanah? So he said, no, it's not our Rosh Hashanah, Chalila, it's not our Rosh Hashanah, it's their Rosh Hashanah. I said, did you ever learn Masechta Rosh Hashanah? it's abundantly clear that Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Hashanah for Yidden and Goyim, and every other line in davening in Rosh Hashanah says that, beferish. And they don't have another Rosh Hashanah, even though every country has their own, but that's like anything else that they make up when they go along the way. It has no shaykhs to anything, and its sources are in pagan superstitions and more recently Christianity, and it's also to celebrate in any form or fashion. And I tell that to some people, they say, oh, it's good to know, I'm going to stop doing it. And sometimes I hear comments like, so what do I do that night? I said, it's not nittul you can learn. What do you mean, what do I do that night? You go to night seder. I don't know exactly why you weren't at night seder that night in the other years, but there's no head to have this, and the offices that have holiday parties are politically correct enough, certainly in New York, to have a generic holiday party, not on December 25th because no one's there, not on January 1st. If you have to be there, you go to pump some hands and show them you're there and get lost as quickly as possible, because the whole matzav is not a place where any ben Torah should be, which is painfully obvious to anybody who's ever been to one of these. But yes, January 1st is a classic example of Chukasayim. It's worse, but it's at least Chukasayim. If you didn't know that it might be Rudin of Razar, you know it's not our Chag. And if it's not our Chag, then we can't be celebrating it. Valentine's Day. Did I skip any in between? I'm not that familiar with the calendar, even though I've given Shaar on this. Valentine's Day, what? Martin Luther King. Okay, Martin Luther King, you can give tribute to the civil rights movement, and we have, that's a, whatever. Yeah, you can be happy we live in a free country. Let's put it that way, and the civil rights hopefully have helped all the minorities, we hope. Yeah, no, Nittul, we skipped, that was December 25th. Yeah, no, that's just a machlokes whether December 25th is December 25th, which is not, by the way. The other one's more correct. And yeah, but if you don't deal them over here, it doesn't look like they keep the hiddur of not learning on Nittul. They do? Okay, you're all invited to Muncie. We'll figure something out. And that, I have no time as the minig is Makarim Bahari Kaidish. If you have the minig and you take care of all the other things, you can learn every other night of the year. It's Gavaldik. But yes, the other one's more correct just based on the calendar. It's a Chiddush that anybody keeps the first one, but that's a different schmooze. We can't explain every minig. Valentine's Day, although there was a very high-profile, wonderful Baal Tzedakah Yid who made his fortune on Valentine's cards. That's Gavaldik, if you can, I have no problem with that. But and he's selling mostly to Goyim, so I have no problem with that. Goyim don't have an Issa D'Oraisa of Chukasayim. They have an Issa D'Oraisa of Avodah Zarah, but they don't have the Chash, the Gzeira D'Oraisa of Chukasayim. Valentine's Day has no shaykhs whatsoever for both reasons. Number one, it's priestess in its nature. If you want to show your Akaras L'Tov and your Ava to the ones, special people in your life, so do it every day, or why don't you do what it says in Chumash and get her a gift for Shalosh Regalim. That's a Chiyuv D'Oraisa, so that would be a good place to start. Valentine's Day is just, I don't say it's a waste of money, but it's an Issa D'Oraisa. Happens to be the Valentine's Day, the Valentine part, is also rooted in the Greek gods, again, Avodah Zarah, Kishuf, and the like, straight there without doing much research, and that would make it classic Chukasayim. So no, even if it's expected, although if somebody very close to you expects it, please have them call me. I've debated this with certain people, and they say, no, not for me, I'm asking for a friend. We've been here too long if Valentine's Day is being celebrated in your house or any other neighbor in Flatbush. But you know what? If they don't know, we try to teach them, and yes, it's not just a display of Akaras L'Tov, it's an Issa D'Oraisa. What's bizarre and very troubling is now in Eretz Yisrael, secular, not yet from well-intended Israelis took Tu B'Av and kidnapped it and hijacked it and made it into a Jewish Valentine's Day. It has no shaykhs whatsoever. Tu B'Av is a day maybe where we read Shidduchim so they should get married. It doesn't talk about what you should be saying or doing after you're married. There's no shaykhs whatsoever, and they just kidnapped it because copying the Goyim, and we were Jewish, so we need a Jewish Valentine's Day. The Valentine, anybody who's a saint usually has a lot of blood on his hands, and that's where it starts, and it gets worse as you go backwards in history. The next one might surprise you. How can we pick on a good old groundhog? But once I started giving a lot of shiurim, the godless of the sugya was that I'm usually talking to intelligent people, Baruch Hashem, and they started realizing there's a whole sugi out here that we're really, as Americans, not too familiar with. And what I was able to get across is everything is suspect till you have a good reason. You want a classic example of something that's absolutely insanely ridiculous? Go watch a groundhog and plan your vacation based on that. It's totally nonsensical. Now, the groundhog is not Pritzes Dik Be'etzem. The fact that I can't believe intelligent people still actively do this. Why are they doing this? That's classic Chukasayim. Where they have a minig, I don't like using the word minig because minig is reserved for our Heiligim and Hagim. It's a custom. They have a custom, it makes absolutely no sense. Happens to be, it is rooted, I'm not surprised, rooted in Avodah Zarah and Kishuf. Many ways. It's astounding how civilized, well, we call it that, well, they said that in pre-war Germany also, but how the modern secular man is still doing things that have no clue, mamish minig of a sambiyadam, and go back 1,000 years, 1,500 years. That's all rooted in superstitions and avodah zarah, and they're still doing it. The groundhog, lo ben navi, lo ben benoshel navi, their approval and success rate is well below 40%. I could do a better job. And I know nothing about the weather. The whole thing is someone saying now they have 2 groundhogs and they have a machlekes every year. It's ridiculous. So the good news is most people aren't participating unless you're the mayor of New York or something like that. And the only way you could be over this issue is to actually look up in the paper the next day, what did Mr. Groundhog say? And I want to plan my spring, whether it's going to be warm or cold. If you're actively taking that even 1 ounce of seriousness, even a half an ounce of curiosity, you're getting dangerously close to this because then you're participating in this mishagas. As I said, they have a terrible track record and it is rooted in avodah zarah and superstitions. So you'd be amazed. Okay, the next 2, I'll lump them together because they're absolutely perfectly fine. And it's a perfectly fine day to learn all day and night. Memorial Day and Labor Day. No lashon hara to say about them. Memorial Day, people fought for the country, respect them, and Labor Day, the masses, the socialist masses, Democrats, or whatever you want to call them, are getting a day off, and that's fine. So you want to have a day off, and there's no cholos, there's nothing to mark. So somebody asked me, you could tell we're 4 months into the year, somebody said he's a little concerned, he thinks maybe having a barbecue is chukosayim. I said, no, that's the sushi heter. We have a barbecue because they have a barbecue, and we have a barbecue for the same reason, it tastes good. So there's no, to my knowledge, I didn't investigate this heavily, there's no official way to have the barbecue. You have to have gafka, 4 hamburgers, 7 hot dogs. There's no rules and regulations. You have a barbecue, people are off, you want to have them over for dinner. The Kanaim in my shir said, no, they think it might be a Shai Levinissa Deraisa because this whole scene looks very American. I said, call me a makel. I think it's mutter. So they have Memorial Day and Labor Day. You can have a barbecue on July 4th if you want. Lamaisa, as long as you're not frying your fish on the same barbecue, which I thought everybody knew was Pashut, but this past Memorial Day, somebody asked me that. And he said, well, how else am I supposed to have my fish and my... I said, first of all, the fish you don't have to fry, you can have sushi. Second of all, you're using the same thing and it's pretty greasy. Like, what are you thinking, fish and meat? You change your fork. So there are kashrus concerns about how you do your barbecue. I don't believe there is a chukosayim issue. Similarly, July 4th and President's Day. July 4th, I'm a little concerned about the fireworks. I think Lamaisa, they're not usher. And President's Day, the shayla of Lesichanim. Can you tell other stories that probably never happened about how honest Abe was and how Washington did cut the cherry tree and then he said vidui and then he did tshuva and he went through the whole... I don't believe any of these stories happened, but is there an Issa Lesichanim? So I was asked recently in an interview about this. We were talking about ball games and the issues of following sports and idolizing the players, which is an Issa Lesichanim. Lesichanim is lo titein lamchein. That's a big problem. So again, if you go to the game, just stay clear of the pritzas kalisha. Don't stay too long because you need to relax, but you need 6 hours to relax. That's Ramesh's Moshe Vleisim Bittul Torah issue. Many said, I'm not holding there anyway. Okay, so you have to see how long you need to relax. And there's no chukosayim issue, but if you talk about how wonderful the players are and what fantastic people they are and look at them throw the ball, just to stay out of this Issa D'Oraisa, it's not our sugya now, try to put, which you should do anyway, put a Kosh Baruch Hu into the equation and say, look at the great throwing arm Hashem gave him. Or look at that guy, even though he's a manuvel or mukashchim, some of them are, some of them aren't, he still knows how to throw a ball. Something like that. You're not creating an idol over here, and you're calling a spade, and you shouldn't get involved in that, which is playing the sports is perhaps good exercise. It's the following and getting into that culture. So President's Day, I don't know if it's even politically correct today to give a compliment to any president, dead or alive. So maybe we don't have a problem with this issue, but it's a shayla. I think there are rayas that if the person's no longer alive, there's no isla sechanim, because this is to come close to them, not just the ummah. So I think there is room to be makel. The person asked me, how can we teach it in social studies? And they say over these stories, is it usher? I said, I don't think it's usher. I don't think it's true, the story, but I don't think it's usher. So that's pretty par of President's Day. Mother's Day and Father's Day, a little complicated, because on the one hand, it's a bit of a hevel v'shtus to pick one day when you have chiv d'oraisa in this has a difference to do it every day. And unfortunately, there are gayim who do keep it avim well, and there are those who send a card, I hope American greetings, on Father's Day, Mother's Day, and not much in between. That's a shtus. If you're highlighting one day, it's hard to say it's usher, because you say, no, we try to do it every day, and we try to express it in a tangible way. It's a very Goyish idea. It's an American thing, but again, what's not usher is not usher. If your parents expect it, I'm more worried about them getting aggravated that you didn't give them breakfast in bed and whatever else they do in these days. And if you didn't know it was Mother's Day and they didn't know, which is what happens in my house, then ma teva ma noim. But you got to know if it's not usher, then what? No, that's what I'm saying. If they're expecting it and you don't, and there's going to be taina, then what's not usher is not usher. Next kula, I actually have we're almost on even ground. Black Friday. So some of the people from the Shaar wanted to answer this. Black Friday, it's the beginning of the Chagah, the holiday season. I said, I'm aware of that. It's also marketing, and this is pure marketing. And if you have a retail store and you want to sell, it has nothing to do with the Chagah. So I was vindicated this summer or last summer. Somebody told me, I don't know how old this is, somebody told me they're having Black Friday in the middle of the summer, which is a shtickle sacrilegious. The answer is there's nothing to do with religion. It's a marketing gimmick. And they realize, why do it once a year? You could do it twice a year. The mamish ridiculous. Lishitasam, it's insane. But if it sells more product, they're willing to do whatever it takes. And that's my raya, that it's not usher and it's not chukasayim, even though originally it was tied in with the beginning of their season. And similarly, they have this thing afterwards, they call Boxing Day, where everybody starts returning all the things they didn't like in the first place, which is extreme lack of akaras atayv. So don't do that if you get something for Hanukkah, which I'll get to soon, because that's a problem, perhaps. But you can get something for Hanukkah. The shaila is how. We'll get to it in a moment. So Lamaisa, the fact that these things are around their chagas doesn't make it chukasayim. If it's all marketing and returns and things like that, it's merchandising, and that's fine. Let me go to Hanukkah, because Hanukkah is a big issue. Many have this feeling, and the feeling is kind of obvious. Many have this feeling that there's something going on in America where in Europe they weren't doing this. I'll discuss in a moment whether they weren't, but still not to the extent we're doing it. And there are families that give money, and the families give a lot of money, and the families who give gifts, and the families who wrap the gifts. If you come downstairs and there are a bunch of gifts wrapped under the menorah, we have a big problem. That I will tell you. So it's frightfully, something's growing on us, and it happens to be the same time of year, and there's something suspicious about it. With that said, what's not usher is not usher. And there are Peskim in America who tried to be miyashiv the minig of, and it was a minig. Rabbi Yaakov says there was a minig to send money to the Rabbeim on Hanukkah, and they sent with the kids, and the kids carrying money, so they wanted to get in on it, and then others add that it's still, there's the din simcha in Hanukkah, maybe, but there might be a din simcha, and it is a yontif, and therefore, just like there's a chiv d'oraisa, as I mentioned before, to get your children and your family presents on Shalosh Regalim, so too, this is a Yontif Midrabanon, and therefore there was a minig in Europe. I asked somebody whose grandfather was in Germany. I picked Germany because in Eastern Europe it's hard to know, because if they had the minig, most people couldn't afford it because they didn't know what to eat quite often. In Western Europe, they had a little more money. He said his father His grandfather actually was in Germany, upper middle class, and he asked them, and he said they had no such minig. It's not a right, just one country. Lamaisa, there is such a minig. So if you're doing it in your house, you have what to rely on. There are some who gave certain days, the days that never fall on Shabbos. There are various minhagim in Klal Yisrael. Lamaisa, don't overdo it. Because if we're feeding into the marketing and we're giving every single night, and it goes, one family told me they're giving every night and they don't spoil them, it just goes up. They start off with something very low value and then they get into the thousands by the end of Hanukkah. I was nervous he was going to tell me he was doing that for 12 days. So I get, this is, I'm being sarcastic, but a lot of this is suspect. It's mutter, just don't go overboard. Okay, this is the introduction. It's already 10 to... Let's go to birthdays. That's always a very hot topic. So there are two shaylas. Celebrating birthdays. Is that chukah sayim? Does that come from the Goyim? Does it not? Paiskim have many tshuvas on it. There are rayas for and against. Some say the only birthday we see highlighted in Chumash is Pyro, and that's not good company. End of discussion. Okay, that's one angle. That's a serious angle. Torah doesn't highlight it, except we're talking about Rosh Hashanah. Others say, Lamaisa, there are some birthdays that are in Chazal, 60th birthday, person's Baruch Hashem, out of Misavdei Shamayim, it doesn't mean Rachmana litzlan, somebody who didn't make it got it. That was his amount of years, but it is a milestone, and Rabbi Yosef himself celebrated in some sort. They bring down for some Sefer, that maybe even a Shachiyanu by 70, because that's Yimei Shnaisav, and now he's getting extra. So there are minhagim. Bar Mitzvah is a Yam Shel Shlomo. There are certain benchmarks. What gets everybody very confused is the even more fiery debate on Bas Mitzvah. Ramesha has two tshuvas on this, and he says there's no makar, it was never the minig, and it was never mentioned in previous years, and it shouldn't be done. It comes straight from the Reform. It took it straight from the Christians. And you have to be suspect, because that is, all of a sudden, it made either a comeback or it just came. And it would be a very strange coincidence. The Christians have the 12th birthday as a highlight, and the Reform copied everything from the organ in their temple, copied from the church, to possibly the Bas Mitzvah. With that said, so Ramesha is not a fan at all, so to speak. Yosef is a tshuva, and he says there was such a meaning. They quote a Ben Ish Chai. Sometimes it's misquoted. Ben Ish Chai didn't say you should celebrate it and make all party. He said if it's being done, he likes the minig of at least getting her a new dress and talking to her about all mitzvahs and marking it in some way, which I think, by the way, is where it landed in our community. I hope it's where it landed. Sometimes it's a bit overdone, but to mark it in some way, there is zichah what to rely on in a private setting with family. If it's a couple of friends, fine. To make a big bash, we're still suffering from the bar mitzvahs before we even get to the Bas Mitzvahs. And Ramesha clearly is concerned about the source. And historically, there are those who argue we had it first. And Rabbi Yosef says in Tshuva, there are makaris by the Sfardim. And their Tshuva is written already in Germany that we had it, even though that's where the Reform started. But they were defending it, that the girls need it and they need the encouragement, which they do. But again, in a very toned down version, because the hype about it in terms of a source is highly suspect, because it's not suspect. We know why it got popular to the extent that it did. The birthdays themselves, bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, even 60, 70, whatever you're celebrating, if you're doing it every year, you have what to rely on. It's a milestone. If you use it in the context of you lived another year, you thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you ask for another year after that, even though we do that on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. There are some very, very strange things going on in terms of the Sukkah Chukasayim, and primarily around the cake. There are makaris. This part is not Poshit. The makaris that the whole thing with the round cake was worshipping the moon, and that you could take or leave, because do you ever wonder why matzah was by default round, and they had to make a whole complicated machine to make them square? Because if you take a round ball and you keep hitting it and it goes out, normally things are round. So it's easier to make a mold where it's round. It's not such a kasha why you have a round cake. Ugos, Russian, round. So that wouldn't be a tiyufta. It goes very much downhill from there. You're talking about candles, as I mentioned before, often when you have fire, there's something rooted in Avodah Zarah. And as Yidden, first of all, candles used to be chazah treif. Paraffin is not. We wouldn't put candles in a cake. We also, many of them, meaning not to blow out candles. That's not Torah Messina either. They asked Reb Chaim, he said he doesn't see a problem blowing out candles. Your grandmother will tell you not to, and don't start up with your grandmother. And there are sources why you shouldn't. Shaila is how far back those sources go. Lamaisa, whether you do, whether you don't, it was never a popular minute dafka to have candles and blow them out. And then to make a wish after you blow out candles, if you haven't yet figured out in the last 45 minutes that's serious chukosayim territory, then go back to the video and start doing chazara. That's a disaster. The whole getup. You can take apart each thing and maybe defend the round cake and maybe defend the birthday in the first place, which is a machlekes, celebrating it. Did it come from Paro or not? And celebrate in a way where you're serving food and maybe you're giving gifts. Putting candles on and sticking into the cake and blowing them out and making a wish is way over the top. So I've said this to many people. They can't believe it. It's such an entrenched American custom. I said, yeah. It's not a entrenched American custom. The Eastern Europeans are doing it, and the little I've read on it, it was all immersed in superstitions and Avodah Zarah and Kishuf and Ichush and the like. We shouldn't be doing it. There's no reason to be party to this sort of thing, no pun intended. And you want to serve cake. We don't need the candles. Again, this sugya, whenever you're learning a sugya, you want to be mekel, you want to be machmer, first figure out, are we dealing with a possible list of deraisa? And if we are, and you don't really need it, you're not desperate for a kula, why get into the territory? So it's certainly not a great idea. Let's continue. Yeah, I think the round is also okay. That's the easiest thing to mimiyashiv. Oig Melech HaBashan, oddly enough, was called Oig, even though he was one of the longest living people. He got Oig, the Chazal tell us. He came to Avram Avinu Pesach, and Avram Avinu was making round matzahs, of course, because they didn't have machine matzahs yet. And he asked him what it was, and he was nispal, and he told everybody about this cookie, this cake. There's a lot more to say on that, but it's not a share by Oig Melech HaBashan. There's a lot of mussar over there, what his chus was to live so long, and he had some element of ruchnius, but it was round, and when they baked, it was round. So that wouldn't bother me so much, but the candles, and if you hear the first 10 minutes of this sugya, you will get very nervous, some candles and wishes and prayers and muttering things under your breath. Even if you're saying a Kel Mole, or you're saying a Kapitel Tehillim, we don't blow candles and pray. It's just not and if the Goyim are doing it, they have no clue why, and that's why we're nervous about the Chukosayim. Again, Darkei Shalom, if you're not participating, if not asking you to blow, which sometimes is the case, tell them you're all winded, you just came from a Shir and Chukosayim and you have no strength left. And that'll hopefully get them asking, like, what'd you say in the Shir? And it'll give you a Pesach to say that this might be a Chiv Malkus. But if you just stand on the side and you can't get anywhere, yes, you can be present because it's not Livnei Iver making the party anyway. Okay, a few of them in Hagim by Shidduchim. So somebody asked me, is it Chukosayim to give a diamond ring when you get engaged? I told them, you're not getting out of this one. I knew where this is coming from. I know the people ask questions. It was probably invented by Jews. They controlled the diamond industry as they do control all the world banking and everything else. So it happens to be a gift panasa to a lot of Yidden. And there's a makar in the Gemara. They sent Savlamis, and you give a gift. Does it have to be a diamond? They said, no, should be Yosef. What's with the diamond? This crazy minig. I said, I'm okay with the zirconium and the cheaper versions. Nobody can tell the difference. But if she finds out, you're going to be in big trouble. So I would stick with it because it's a nice gift. That's not chukazayim. If it makes sense, you give a jewel. You give jewelry. That's Savlamis. No problem with it. I do have an issue, and please tell your friends, because I first heard this during the Shaar, and I thought the guy was making it up. And then I heard it again and again, and I've heard it 50 times. This is straight out of the sugya of what you shouldn't be doing. There are Bachurim, Baruch Hashem, who get to the point where they're proposing. Gavaldik, the moment we're waiting for. I can't figure out the life of me who would think in their wildest nightmare that you should get down on your knees and propose. Like, where are you? Like, from home, we don't get down on our knees for anybody, even our wife, and we hold them in the highest esteem. It's priestess, you get it down on your knees. Okay, so a few Bacham asked me, so I promise I'm not doing it l'shem avodah zarah. I said, I wouldn't even accuse you of deifying your kala, because that would be too nice. But so you have to know when something's a goyish meaning. We don't get down on our knees. I've had electricians and construction workers ask, for the job, they got to get down. Can they go down on the knees? The answer is yes, if you have no other way to do it. Even that, there was an intuition that my grandmother told me, don't get down on the knees. We don't get down on our knees. Number one. Number two, the whole mahalach, proposing, getting married, the whole mahalach is a very sensitive thing. And you got to have a balance between pritus and sneas, and the whole thing is straight from the Goyish culture. People have told me that after hearing this, they now understand why it should be absolutely also to open the door for her on the date. Now, it happens to be that I don't want to get myself in too much trouble over here. I said, the one thing we know for sure, which never ends up happening, is if you open it in the date, you should open it when you're married also. And they thought I was going much too far with that. So where does it come from? This is from the Goyim. Again, we're not against it. You want to always open the door for her because she's holding the baby, she's holding the thing, you don't want to have her wait in the rain. Gavaldik. Then be consistent. If you're doing it because you're trying to show chivalry is not dead and you're a knight from medieval England, that's not very Yiddish. I can't say it's inherently priestessistic, that example, but if your sons are going out, just advise them. I don't like saying things are an absolutist deraisa. This is not very Jewish. It was never done. And they tell me it caught on like wildfire. There's no reason to get down on your knees. You could say the same nice thing, which should be short and sweet, without getting down on your knees. And why should we adopt things that are clearly goyish in stance? And I just thought it was bizarre. And I told my son, who's a chassan, that if anybody even mentions the idea, please send them to me. And nobody came, but I think he did it the right way. So I just don't think it has a place, and it was never part of our minhag. We shouldn't make these things up. And somebody asked me, well, we never had a minhag to propose. That's not true. It's a Farish Gemara. That you have to, and it's a priestess if you get married without proposing. It's also dangerous. So we have a system. We don't make things up, and certainly getting down on your knee. One knee, two knee, whatever it is. There is a shaila. Standing up by a chuppah. The minhag clearly here is that most people stand up when the chassan and kala come in. The question in the poskim is, where in the world does this come from? Moshe was very against it, because Moshe held it was straight chukasayim from the goyim who stand up when they come in. And Moshe did not get up. Rabbi Yaakov held that there was a source from the Mishnah Bikurim when somebody's about to do a mitzvah. You respect them by standing up. They brought the Bikurim at Yerushalayim, and the tradesmen would get up for them. Shaila is the Tushtel, because getting married, according to the Rosh, is not a mitzvah, it's only a Hechsher mitzvah. Even according to the Rambam, it's not her mitzvah, so get up for the chassan and not the kala, and that already looks strange. L'maisa, most people are doing it. Somebody told me it has nothing to do with any of this. People just wanted to see, and everybody was standing up and looking over everybody else. Okay, then it's not chukah saying if it's a practical thing. It's clear that in Europe they never had this many because nobody ever sat. They were standing. Do you ever see the famous picture in Europe of the chuppah? It's a very famous painting. They were standing. They were in the chutzner, the base Kehilas, and they were standing. They didn't put down chairs. So you couldn't stand up because you were standing already. So to say this was the minhag in Europe is completely wrong. So now we have something that started in America. The question is, can you be miyashiv it or not? As I said, a good example where everything has to be examined. Over here, many are miyashiv the minhag, and that is the minhag. I'm going to round out the chasna before we go on to the next item, and that is for those of you who are marrying off your last child. This mezhinka is bizarre. That's a nice word. Is it absolutely usher? I'm a big fan of Karech Te'atera, and when something's already happening on the ground, even though it was definitely started by people who were not from. I traced this old minhag in Klal Yisrael back to the 1920s to the klezmer bands. That's as far as I got back. You're not going to get any farther. If you do, you're reading a forged document. There is no such custom in Klal Yisrael. There's no such minhag. And you want to have a karas atayv, you married off your last child, it's a gavaldik simcha. You want to dance more, you want to dance through the night. A mitzvah dance depends if you're not learning on nittel, so you'll figure it out. The whole special tune, which is probably some Hungarian folk dance, that's a different problem, getting into Geisha music, which can be chukasayim, but it depends how goyish and how priestesstic it is. Even if this is relatively tame, I never stayed around for it, I don't know exactly what it sounds like. Lamaisa, we don't have, not only because of the fairy tales, we don't do well with people coming in with brooms and I know they have a pshat, they retrofitted the whole thing. It's a simon, you want to sweep them out of the house, you don't want them back. I say, you don't want them back? I want my kids back every week. Each one comes every other week. I said, no, you don't want them back the bad way. That's the broom. I don't know. Somebody made the whole thing up, and now it's like Torah Sinai. So it's not Torah Sinai, it's Bekashi Mutter, and if you see people doing it, so you say, what if you're at a chasna and they're doing it? Call me a makel again. To make a macha where it might be, it's certainly not a minig. Is it parv enough that you can't aser it and slam somebody with a chiyuv malchus? For this sugya, possibly. It's mighty strange. So I, Mitzvah Hashem plan, unless it's going to start World War III with my mechutin, I have ways to go of not having it. And I don't make many conditions when I marry off my children. This, Mitzvah Hashem, will be one of them. And if there's major pushback and that's the only malchaikas we have, I'm just saying this now, if you come to my chasna and there's a mezhinka and I'm not there, don't blame me. But lamaisa, it's not our minig. No one's arguing it was our minig. The shaila is, how bad is it? So when something is strange, and there are theories that they traced it to some back roads in some village in Czechoslovakia, Hungary or something, and the Goyim were doing it, then that's not good if you trace it back there. But to say it's absolutely ulcer, can't go on record as saying, I'm just not comfortable with it. Okay, we have an hour and 20 minutes on the CD, so I have another 6 minutes. Okay. I will be giving, as I said, I started Chazar Muncie, I'll be giving part 2, so wherever you do Chazara from this one, you'll get part 2, then go back to the 74 of the other ones, you'll have a slower version. This shayla comes up in the office a lot. I'm moving to the life cycle on the calendar. So there are 2 issues. One is there's a constant fight with Obamacare and the crisis in healthcare over the last 10 years or so. It's hard to get good healthcare and the prices keep going up. So sometimes the boss offers that if you pay in $15,000, we'll cover it. It's very, very expensive, as you all know. In recent years, they have these health share companies. This is a big problem. I'm not going to do justice to it now, but this is actually nogea lamaisa to many people, even if they're not going to birthday parties, they're not dancing with brooms, they're not doing any of the other things. People need health insurance, and a lot of people can't afford it. They have health shares out there. Now there's one under Frum auspices. It's not an advertisement for them, or I'm sure they're trying to do a good job, but they patterned it after the one which is extremely problematic. There are many of them out there. Most of them are church-based. And when you look at the paperwork, it's appalling because I was involved in the sugya. I gave Moses Sherm, I started giving him 4 years ago. And I got calls from the people involved in the Midwest in these things who are trying to correct it and maybe make their own, which they did already. The ones that are very popular and used by many from people, again, I'm not going to say it's usher, but ask a shayla. The thing you have to sign has a list of beliefs you have to sign on to with clear references to Avodah Zarah and Christianity and Yashka and all these things. They fixed it up a couple of years ago, but there's another line that says when you check this box, you're also agreeing to everything else in this 55-page small print. Well, I had to read 55 pages of small print. And guess what? There's a lot of pretty bad stuff tucked in there. So your great-grandparents might have been killed rather than say, when the Catholics came into town, the Crusades came into town, I believe in something, and it is Yahar Vayaver to sign it. There are those who wanted to say, without a raya, that, yeah, you don't really mean it, you're just signing it. I have a better idea. When the Crusaders come into town, why don't you just say it and not mean it? Why is everybody getting killed? The answer is, this is serious stuff, and it's assumed that it was Yahar Vayaver to say it, sign it, or whatever the case may be. Happens to be, behind the scenes, I'm still working on fixing it up, and we got them recently to agree to another version which we marked up and crossed out many, many, many lines, and we asked them if they can use that, and they said fine, because business is business, and that's good. I have no problem with that. They don't have to be doing it lishma, and that works. But do not, if you have one, look at what you signed, read all of it. If you don't, be careful before you sign it. That's not just chukasayim. That's a shayla being meidil avodah zarah, even though you're clearly doing it because it saves money. But you can clearly do it to save your life, and in Siman Kufna and Zayin Yeridea, it was assumed throughout all the generations that it was also. and it was Yehovah Vayaver. It's a very serious thing. The office shaila that comes up when you're not talking about which health plan you're being given is when the boss's mother dies. He's a very devout, nice Italian fellow, and you know where your bread is buttered, and the boss's mother passed away, and you got to come to the funeral. So you can't walk into a church. That's the first isser. That's usser. No more comment on that. If it's in a funeral home, they usually have a viewing. The viewing, the minig, the custom of a viewing is chukosayim. And we're not setting them up. We didn't put the lipstick on him and the rouge, and usually they look better then than they did before they died. So we didn't do all that, but walking by in the procession and participating in the viewing is a problem. It's sometimes a political liability not to be able to do it, and if you're faced with a possible hefsid, then ask a shayla. I think there might be some wiggle room and there might be what to discuss, but l'chatchila, if you send a nice card, you send flowers, or you go to the outside and say, I'm just here to wish you condolences, shake his hand, and better even to give him a hug and tell him you feel really bad, but you don't really want to come in for the viewing. You say you're queasy, make up some nice story. That's called being Mashadim Nedak Shalom, and then it's mutter. Participating is an issue. I mentioned two more quick things because we're almost out of time. Somebody had asked me, is there any, and when he asked me this shaila, I was the shtayman, because this is also a classic example. Some of these are more gray. Some of them, I believe, are not fully usher. You can't usher them, although I wouldn't do them. What? Oh, stand on the mic. Okay, I think everybody's hearing me loud and clear so far. Maybe you wish you wouldn't have heard some of it. Somebody asked me about the thing that he does in the city when he goes to Manhattan all the time. They have a lot of parks and fountains. And in these fountains, he was doing this. I think a lot of us have been doing it. They have a custom. They go and they throw pennies in and quarters. So right away I heard this. I said, it's zicha nisa deraisa, because Jews don't throw away money. That's the first thing. So that can't be a Jewish custom. We're going to throw away. So he said, no, I wanted to go in and pick them up. No, and, that would be a chil Hashem. Where does this come from? So if you're attuned to this already, this is a classic example of chukosayim. It was hard to find fresh water for centuries in Europe. When they finally found, quite often in Germany this is rampant, they used to put an idol right by the well that the gods should bless the water source. They shouldn't lose it. And every time they drew water, they would take a kopek and throw it to the idol, so the idol should keep giving them fresh water. You ask average guy today, never heard of it. What do? I don't know, Rockefeller Plaza, you throw pennies in. That's classic, vintage chukosayim l'selechu. So tell somebody in a soundbite, you heard a share tonight, so this is the right to throw in pennies. He's going to say, Bal Tashchis? Nah, penny's not a shavar puta. I don't think it's Bal Tashchis. You're having a good time. Why should it be Bal Tashchis? So you can't explain this in a soundbite, but I think you're with me until now. I was so not surprised when I found out who would be crazy enough to throw money into a pond. The answer is there was a god there with a fountain and they had to please the gods. So they were sacrificing to the god. I don't have to tell you at this point about the nefarious, evil tooth fairy, do I? There are people who do this. You have to never have heard of this or chukosayim l'selechu. Any custom that depends on fairies and ghosts and goblins, which is part of the Halloween scene. Here it's a nice fairy and she brings money. So besides the fact that you're not allowed to lie to your kids, you can't tell them that the tooth fairy brought 25 cents, maybe now it's $25. And you can't say that she came through the chimney either. And there are all sorts of crazy things people tell their kids. You can't lie, that's first of all. And second of all, this is, again, chukosayim based on superstitions, nichush and the like. If your kid is crying because the tooth fell out, you can give them some ice cream or ices, do something else, but don't make a quarter appear under the pillow and mention anything about fairies. You can give them, cash will never be refused. You say, you're crying, here, have a 10. There's no chukosayim over there. I think you're spoiling the kid rotten, but there's no isser. A lot more to be said, so I guess you'll tune in when I continue on Muncie next week. And any questions, we could take it after Marav. The USBs are available in the back. Anybody wants them? Okay.
Shem Egen Shir Torah. I'd like to be Yasher Koyach to Viener for the very informative shir. Even though there are many guys charities out there, I'm sure even the Rav will be minded at it. There's still a mitzvah tzedakah and achzakas Torah, and it's still a mitzvah to sponsor a shir and support Egen Shir Torah. I have a chelik and a Bas Torah the Rabbi. Call Egen Shir Torah 718-851-8651 or email tapecenter@yeshivanet.com for this great mitzvah and schus. I'd like to be Yasher Koyach to Elam Shem for the support of tonight's shir, the Nishmas of Gedalia Aryeh, Ben of Shmuel Yitzchak, all of our Shalom's outside tonight. The Nishmos at Shur B'tzar Chaim. CDs of tonight's shir will be available shortly. Chananya ben Akashem, Rotzak Elish Baruch L'Zakis, this Yisrael Figure Hebron Torah Mitzvah Shanam Alonoi Chofetz Aman Tzidke Yagdol Torah V'Yader.